many educators feeling like if they did send process art home, parents would assume that they're paying for their child to scribble.
So when children create their own art is when you get to really see where they're at.
Many of the children in our settings have, whether or not we're aware of it, and they often carry things that they have no words for.
If you've ever listened to an adult artist talk about their art, you'll notice that there's something very similar to children about their expression. With reflecting on this, we can raise more generations of children who don't lose that spark.
Welcome everyone, we're so glad you're here today. I'm Dana, Head of Pedagogy Innovation here at Parent App and the Early Years Academy. And today we're talking about arts. So differentiating between process arts and adult guided or guided arts. And looking at art beyond a filler activity or something that we do so that we have something nice to put up on our display boards, but as a fundamental and powerful developmental tool that we have in early years settings. I'm really excited to be joined today by Tamara Jayyusi, an early years educator joining us from Innisfil Montessori Academy in Ontario, Canada. Tamara is actually an artist herself and has spent years thinking deeply about how art truly serves children, and more importantly, how we as educators can use it with intention. So Tamara, big welcome, and please tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you into art.
Thank you, Dana. I'm really excited to be here and talk about this, one of my favorite topics to discuss. I'm an early childhood educator working in Montessori schools, but before that, I was actually in a design program and I had big interest in design and art. And then my beginnings as a teacher was actually at an after-school program where we taught art. It was guided art, which we'll get into in a little bit. But that's when I discovered that I really like incorporating that and teaching children, and it was kind of like this aha moment for me that this is what I like to do. And that's what I've been doing since. I've been working in Montessori schools for 5 years now.
Perfect. We're really excited to have your perspective. So I guess let's start by talking about art as an experience.
Yeah. So if we think about what art experiences can offer children, just as you would any activity, you're thinking about how this impacts their development. What is this offering them in terms of, progressing their skills and their character. So art has a lot to offer. If we think about it, is actually a very sensory experience. It can be. They're constantly getting feedback from the materials they're using and how it translates onto paper or canvas or whatever they're using. So it is very sensory, and it's very stimulating for them also visually to see color and textures and all that. So it's a very rich sensory experience for children. Language too. I find that we use a lot of language to describe what we see when we're talking about art because it's very subjective. So then you start thinking about how can I describe what I'm seeing or what I'm feeling about this particular piece of art or this process that you're making right now. And each person's going to have a completely different way of describing it. So that's also a very rich language experience that they get to really dig deep and see what words do I have that could describe what I'm trying to do or what I'm seeing. So they're learning a lot of language that way. And of course, the fine motor that's involved in using all the tools, brushes, scissors, glue, crayons, all of that. And for a lot of children actually who are not quite interested in practicing their fine motor, for example, for writing and all those things like isolated skills, art could be a great way for them to strengthen their fine motor because they're so engaged in it. Now, not every child. I do have children that are not interested in the art table, but some of them are really interested, and that's what keeps them trying with holding pencil, crayons, and all that. And then also, their sense of belonging and their confidence building, their freedom of expression, and all of these things, and being seen by others and their educators, and they develop the sense of self through what they're creating because they have that. Hopefully, they're having that freedom to express themselves.
And I think this completely reframes how we think about art in our settings. So often we photograph the product, so the finished painting or the completed picture, the thing or the product that we can put up on our wall or put up on our outside our classrooms for parents to see. But what you were describing didn't once touch upon the finished piece. What I heard honored in your description of art as an experience was the actual thought process of a child. So that moment where a child picks up a color, maybe puts it down, chooses a different one. Like what were they thinking about in that moment? Or the pause before they decide like what to draw or which, crayon or marker they want to pick up. And that's where the thinking is happening. And that's, I think, what is worth capturing in your description.
Absolutely.
But I think, but I think it would be naive to go on about like the benefits of art as an experience when we know that a big hurdle to educators facilitating art as an experience completely without any guidance or control is lack of parental support. So many educators feeling like if they did send process art home, parents wouldn't understand or see value in it. They'd get asked, "What is this?" Or parents would assume that they're paying for their child to scribble. And to that, I guess, I would suggest that if we want families to understand the value of what we're offering, we could start photographing the process or inviting them onto the learning. So something like the Parent app is really good for that. You take a photo of a child at the art table and then a short note about what it is they were doing. Maybe the child reached for the blue paint and then put it back and said, no, I need yellow for the sun, before covering the whole paper in yellow. Yes, to us, that seems like, it's just a sheet of yellow paper. But when we invite parents to look at the rationalization that the child did and, the scaffolding that happens to get them to think about the colors that they want to use, it tells a completely different story. And and I think families will feel the difference once they're educated, even when they can't articulate it. And over time, I think it'll shift their perception of what art should be.
Agreed, yeah. I feel like also, just to add to what you said, as educators, we could also frame it a little bit differently and highlight the process by saying something like, today we explored, for example, this medium. For example, today we explored acrylic paints and how they mix together or whatever. Or today we explored watercolor paints, or today we explored how to use crayons and paint. And then that's all it is. So you see what your child did with those two, and that's a learning experience. And I guess framing it as that's all we were aiming for. So there's nothing else to look for in that is also helpful sometimes.
No, I think that's genius. So instead of like today we painted suns or today we painted houses, is today we explored, watercolors. Mm-hmm. And that in itself tells them that it's in the process, right? Art is in the process. Yeah. You were also saying something earlier about, earlier when we had a conversation about how not every artwork needs to go home, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we often think of the art as like we schedule it in, time it to a point where it makes sense to send home, whether it's weekly or on occasions. And absolutely, that's fantastic. We should continue doing that. But also, as a thought, think about incorporating art experiences into your week that don't necessarily need to go home. They stay there. They're in the moment. They're an experience that a child has in the present at school. And it's not for display. It's not for going home. It's not for the parents or anything. It's just for the child to have that experience with complete freedom. So if you are feeling like you'd rather not send a lot of the process art home, and also leave it up to the child. Like sometimes the child is not super attached to their piece. Maybe they don't want to really take it home. Sometimes they are. So not every piece needs to go home. The ones that are attached to a certain occasion or a theme that you're doing certainly can go home all at once, but then save some that are just for exploration and leave it up to the child if they want to keep it or not.
Yeah, I love that. And I think also another thing that came up when we were discussing this and a second hurdle was and I guess we'll get into it in a little bit, but maybe we can touch upon it lightly here, is the sense of loss of control. So when educators feel like during a guided activity, there's a flow, there's predictability, there's expectations, and everything runs smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
But during process arts, a lot of times it feels chaotic.
Mm-hmm. It can get chaotic for sure. So some things that help is that, the educator, as with anything, you do have to be prepared and think it through. How is it going to go, and what are the boundaries that you're going to set? So even though we want to give the child freedom in their creativity, and once they start, they have freedom, but we do also want to guide them into the proper use of materials. So there are boundaries there that need to be set before we start. For example, if I'm setting out, let's say, crayons, I'm going to explain how to use the crayons. It's okay if your crayon breaks by accident. This is what you do. If you are trying to peel it, here's where you put the paper, for example. Paints, this is how you use a brush. If you need a new color, this is how you wash your brush, dry it, and get a new color so the paints don't all get mixed up. This takes a lot of teaching, obviously, but if you do it one thing at a time, then the child is learning the proper use of each art material, so that then later in life, when they're using several art mediums at once, they don't get them all mixed up and in a mess, because they know how to use it. You've already taught them how to use crayons, how to use scissors, how to use glue, how to use paint and brushes and different kinds of paints in individual lessons. So in Montessori also, we're big on like very specific lessons. Everything has a lesson, how to anything. It's like tutorials on everything. So I learned that through Montessori, and I apply it in my art lessons. I take it very seriously. This is how you use a glue stick, from opening it, turning it back down, closing it, and they need to be watching this and know how to use it. Because after that, I send them off, and now you are free to create. I'm not going to interrupt you, but I will remind you this is the proper way to use the material, so you don't ruin them or mix up the experience for other children too, because they need to be able to use them, right?
Yeah, I love that. So freedom within limits, you said that, and I think that really resonated with me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then the last thing I want to touch upon on this slide is the idea of self and belonging, because I think it's the one that also carries the most weight, and it's the one that we least talk about when we talk about art as an experience. So we know from trauma-informed research that children who are carrying stress, whether that's instability at home or experiences that we're not aware of, they need spaces where they can feel genuinely in control. And for many children, the art table can become that space. It can become that one area where nobody is correcting them. There's no right or wrong answer. And what they make is entirely theirs and up to them to decide. And it's not also compared to anybody else's work. So I think that there's a really big area that we can capitalize in order to build as many positive experiences for children who are exposed to trauma as possible through using art as an experience as well.
Absolutely. And just to add a little bit to that, is I would say this is a fantastic opportunity for the educators to observe also their children as they're making art. And you get to learn so much about them and how they even talk about their art. So this is an opportunity for us to step back and just observe and really take in what the child is showing us at this moment. As you said, the moment without judgment or correction, they're showing us a lot.
Right.
So when children experience other people's art, they are also learning a lot just by looking at art and discussing it. One of my favorite things to do is present famous artists and their work and talk about it with children. So I will present the artist, talk a little bit about them, and then show them pictures of their art. And before I say anything about it, their style or what they use, I ask the children, what do you see? Tell me what you see in this. And you get the most amazing descriptions. It's really, truly amazing. I work with like 3 to 6 year olds. So they're right in that like very pure thoughts, like just say it like it is, but also very imaginative, and they also have a lot of language to share. So I noticed that they are really good at taking in art, analyzing it, describing it more than you would expect. Like honestly, because I also discussed art with adults in my like university years, and it's not dissimilar at all. Like they they get it. So I really love talking about art with them, seeing what they see and how they describe it, and then also giving them a little bit additional language then and there, and always trying to frame it positively. Whether we like the art, if the style resonates with your style or not, whether you like some art is black and white, and maybe some children are like more into bright colors and they might not be attracted to that, but you're still looking at it and telling me what you think of it, and we're describing it. So that also gives them an opportunity to learn that we have different perspectives and different ways of expression and different likes and dislikes, and there is no right or wrong in art. So we get to see a wide spectrum of styles. And then we also use that to describe other children's art, because now we've learned the language and how we can talk about art respectfully. So you'll find that when you model that, talking about other children's art, we cultivate that kind of like respect in how we describe, and also respect just that other people have different ways of expressing themselves and doing things. There is, again, no right or wrong way of drawing a sun or drawing a rainbow or a house. This is yours and you do it your way. I'm not here to tell you, oh, I don't like what you made, or that's not how you do it. There's none of that in discussing art.
I love these points, and the idea of children learning to respect perspectives that aren't their own is something I think we deeply underuse in early years as well. So we tend to think art appreciation is just for older children. I mean, I definitely did. But you can do this tomorrow morning. So with a poster, or print out somebody's artwork, you can find on the internet, bring it to your circle time or bring it to the table and just ask, what do you think this person was feeling when they made this? Or what do you think this is about? And like you said, I think we'd be amazed at what children could offer, and the insights that they would have. The other thing I feel strongly about, Tamara, I wanted to add, is ensuring that the art in the classroom, no matter what art you have displayed in your classroom, is displayed at children's height. So I've deliberately put this picture in because this is exactly how, or how I had the children's artwork hung in my classroom. Was it annoying to have to duck underneath it 2,000 times a day when I needed to get from one end to the other? Yes. But would I do it like this every single time? Absolutely. And I remember a parent asking me one day, and I could sense the frustration, but he tried to be very diplomatic, because he said to me, don't you think this is in the way? Kind of like to tell me, like, I don't think you considered how annoying this was, but then he didn't want to offend me. And because he did it like that, it was really lighthearted. It allowed for a really lighthearted conversation. So I asked him, in whose way? And he looked at me confused, and he said, well, like mine and yours, and he pointed to the other adults. But then, like in perfect cinematic fashion, Tamara, his son just happened to walk right underneath it, like unbothered, right in that moment. And I said, well, it's not in his way, and it is his classroom. And I think it was, we both laughed for a really long time, but it got us to both think that, yeah, this space, like inside the classroom, was made with purpose and with him in mind, and all the children, actually. But if your artwork isn't displayed at the children's level, are they then encouraged to look at it or to appreciate art? Because you talk about art appreciation. Yes, you can bring it to circle time and talk about it, but you can also be mindful of the way you're displaying it in your classroom, right?
Absolutely. No, I love that story. So when children create their own art is when you get to really see where they're at, and they get to also explore the actual mediums and the techniques in this area. So it's different than looking at art. Now we're actually seeing how it's created, and there is so much learning happening here, because and it's going to be a spectrum of feelings also that the child is going through, because they're potentially using a material for the first time. So they might be surprised at how it feels or how it interacts, and sometimes they might feel a bit frustrated. It's not doing what they think it should do. So all of this is very valuable information that they're getting by using the materials hands-on. And the more we can offer them time to do that, the more they can actually learn and enjoy the process of making art. So beyond that, there's also exploring their imagination. So as much as possible, we don't interrupt their process unless they're wanting to talk about it or share what they're doing. But they might be having a really vivid thing happening in their imagination as they're creating. And this is really valuable, as you know. So maybe they don't get a lot of opportunity for that. They do maybe during play, imaginative play, but making art can also be a very rich experience in terms of exploring their imagination and their own thoughts. And then hopefully they're learning and embracing the joy of trying and trying over again. If it didn't turn out quite how you wanted, if it's not doing quite what you think it should do, and then you keep trying again and see what comes of it. And that builds resilience and also just joy in trying something new every time and not being afraid of what the outcome could be or should look like. And as you mentioned earlier, expressing the inexpressible. So there's things they might be feeling that they haven't fully processed or they don't know how to express, or maybe they didn't want to talk about, and it might be easier for them to express through making. So these are all really valuable things that children can be experiencing as they're creating their own art.
I wanted to add a trauma-informed lens here because I think it just adds value to what you just said. So children who've experienced stress, instability, or disruption, and many of the children in our settings have, whether or not we're aware of it. And they often carry things that they have no words for, and that's because the experience of stress and trauma actually lives in our bodies, not in language. So art, as you said, is one of the ways that those children can begin to externalize what they're holding inside. So you talked about, just observing what children create with art or what they make. And yeah, I think it says a lot about what they're holding inside that they have no words for. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to say that our role isn't to interpret what we see. It's just to be present, to offer them the materials, as you mentioned, and to say, I can't wait to see what you make with this, and maybe just leave it at that. And those few words can be genuinely healing for a child who's spent a lot of time being corrected or told that they're getting something wrong. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about the joy of trying, I think we can hear it on two levels. So developmentally, yes, and then also emotionally. So a child who feels safe to make a mess or to change their direction or to experiment is a child that's showing you, that you've created that safe space for them to explore. So,
absolutely, yeah, that would be the goal, kind of all this, is to create a safe space for them where they feel comfortable expressing themselves.
Right.
So we touched a little bit on the cultivating respect. So it is modeling positive language, how we talk about other people's art respectfully and respecting their opinions or their, let's say, their creations and their perspectives that are different than our own. And this is a very important skill for children. You'll notice at a young age, they might find it hard to understand why they need to keep, not necessarily keep things to yourself. You might have an opinion, but also just to hold in mind as well that your opinion is valuable and the other person's opinion is also valuable. So this is a very important breakthrough, I think, at the age we work with. And this is a great way for them to learn it, because there is actually no right or wrong in art. So this is a very maybe easy one, I would say, for them to understand. Kind of if they're leaning more towards rules, there is a right, there is a wrong, it's hard to kind of pull them away from that. But in art, I think there's less rules. So it can be a first step in learning that, kind of respecting other people's views. And we can also do this by talking about art by using open-ended questions, even when we're looking at their art. Instead of saying, I love it, it's great, or great job, we can just see we can describe what we see, or we can also ask them open-ended questions like, what would be a good question? What you said, oh, tell me about what you made. Or how did you make this? Tell me about how you made it. So it's not necessarily like, what is it that you made, but just tell me about the process that you went through to get here. And just listening, honestly. I feel like when it comes to art, it doesn't always have to be aesthetically pleasing. That's not why art is made. It's kind of a conversation starter. So it's no different with children. They're not necessarily making it so that it's pleasing to you or the viewer. They're just making it and potentially just to start conversation or to express something. So looking at it that way kind of helps us use the right language, I feel like.
I think that's really powerful. 'Cause for a long time, my instinctive response to a child showing me their artwork, Tamara, was always, "That's so beautiful." And it came from such a good place. Like, I wanted to build the children's confidence. I wanted them to have a love of learning. I wanted them to genuinely enjoy being in the class and feel valued. But as I started to read more and learn more, I realized how it actually ended conversations. So as you said, without meaning to, it was just a comment that instead of then allowing them to give me a back and forth on their thought process and what they were doing, it actually ended it. And without meaning to, I think it also implied that I had a standard of beauty, which I was measuring anything against. So by saying, "Oh, that's so beautiful," I've already said that's I have a standard and I'm measuring your artwork against it. And it wasn't until I started to look at their artwork with like curiosity. So like what you said, "Tell me more about it," or, "Oh, I noticed you used a lot of blue. What's over there?" And those kind of questions, they tell the child that you're genuinely interested in their thinking, not just the output. And the children can feel the difference right away. And I think when we model that descriptive language, we're also giving the children the vocabulary to then be able to use it with each other inside the classroom.
And if you think about it too, even when we're modeling the descriptive language while talking about something that they made, it also helps them kind of look at what they made and in a way process it in a different way. So they've already made it, they put it out there, and maybe some things were thought out and some things were not thought out. And then when we describe what we see, they're processing even more of it from our perspective. So next time they come to make art, they have that language like, "Oh, last time I did this and then someone said that those lines were smooth. So I think I want to try to make that again, or maybe I want to make them different this time. So how can I do that?" So yeah, really like looking at it, you're giving them so much back and forth is so helpful to all of their creative process, I would say.
Yeah, and maybe just even using language like, "Oh, I noticed you have really long lines there," instead of saying to the child, "Oh, that doesn't look like a house," right? Like you're describing what you see, and you're getting them to critically think about the length of the lines they used, so that next time when they are drawing a house, for example, they then think about how intentional they need to be with the lines. But then, whereas if we just said, "Oh, that doesn't really look like a house," I mean, that's what we hear children doing to other children, right? Inside the classroom, just basically like critiquing their artwork. And as you said, it's like a learned skill where we have to teach them, like, you don't need to critique. Sometimes you can just describe what it is. And I think it goes back to the culture that you want inside your classroom. And I think if you were to model the language, it'd be easier for the children to be able to use it.
Absolutely, yeah. I love that you touched on the intention too, because that's exactly what I meant. It's like some things they make are intentional, and if you catch that, then great. They feel so seen by you. They're like, "Yeah, you saw what I was trying to do there." And then if it wasn't intentional, they just kind of mark it as like, "Oh yeah, I see it now, I think." And then if they didn't intend it, maybe next time they'll change it, and then maybe they want to do it again. So yeah, that's a really good point.
And in a way that doesn't shame them, right? Because we know that shamed brains don't learn. So when you say to a child, like, "Oh, that doesn't look like a house," they automatically feel a sense of, let's say, shame or a sense of embarrassment, right? So they're not going to then be critical about what they used or how they decided to draw the house. They've just shut down. And then next time they come to draw a house, it's just going to be like a loop. But when you do it with intention, it opens the dialogue up for sure. And I was going to say the last thing is that to use the parent app as well to include and involve parents. So we know this, and maybe we can also share it with parents about modeling language at home with children when they're doing art. Because, we spend a lot of time with children, but parents also spend a lot of time with their children as well. And if they could support us on this, we'd get a lot further than trying to do it on our own, for sure.
Mm-hmm. If we start to talk about the differences between process art and guided art, just to make it clear, distinction, because so far we've just been talking about what children
process art
from these experiences. So let's distinguish them a little bit. Process art focuses on the process itself, exploration, experimentation, and discovery. So it's just focused on the process, not the product. So sometimes in process art, there's actually no product. Sometimes it's using materials that actually have to be discarded at the end. It's not, you can't really keep, for example, I've seen foam or things like that. Like you can't really keep it because it's just using it in the moment, and then it kind of like
we've done shower curtains before too, like brought in white shower curtains and hung it up, and we can't send that
right
home. Or umbrellas, the transparent umbrellas for children to paint.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Even outside, like in our yard, the wooden fence, and then you would give them water, and they were just painting water on the fence. So that's going to dry. You can't really take that home.
Yeah.
You can capture it in a picture if they really want to, but that's about it. So it really focuses on the in the moment process, versus guided art is geared towards the product itself. And then there's the adult role in that. So in process art, I'd say the adult's role is to provide the materials and provide a few guidelines, like really try to limit the materials and the rules that you're going to set, so that it's kind of easy for the child to enjoy the process. If you set out too much, then you're going to have too many rules about it. So have some materials that you set out, tell them what's acceptable, and then beyond that, you're just leaving the table and observing and making sure everyone is safe. Versus in guided art, the adult is going to provide the materials, provide instructions, demonstrate techniques, and support kind of throughout the process. Because again, there is a product that we're trying to make. We're, for example, trying to draw a house. So you might forget what I said, and maybe you have a question about it. I'm here to help you remember how to do this. And then the child's freedom. In process art, they'll have complete freedom to make whatever they want with the materials you've provided. With guided art, we're reminding them to stay on track and kind of we're making something here. Let's remember this is what we're making. So there is a framework there. The key value in process art is building their imagination, confidence, and all the things we've been talking about. It's very much like a whole child development view, and looking at their emotional and mental state when we're talking about process art. And with guided art, we're building technical skill, perseverance, all good things too, but they're a little bit more specific to skills, and whether it's fine motor or even just like the perseverance in trying again if something is a bit tricky for you. But yeah, so here you can kind of see what the difference is between those two. And with the guided art, definitely there's going to be a product, and it's going to look similar to what all the other children are making, and this could be easily sent home or displayed because we're all making that one thing. Those are the main differences, I would say.
I think the slide is worth screenshotting and maybe adding next to our planners or on the whiteboards in our classrooms. What I really appreciate about this chart is that it takes away the guilt. So I've spoken to many educators who feel like they're doing something wrong when they introduce a technique, or they show children how to hold a brush, or they guide them towards a specific outcome. But I love how you're showing us that there's neither a right or wrong. There's a time and place for either. And the question isn't which approach is actually better, but which one am I choosing today and for what purpose? Mm-hmm. And I think if we can answer that, then the means justify the the output. It's also worth asking, I guess, if we're offering both. So if one approach is quietly taking over the other, which in a lot of settings, sometimes that might happen, and just reflecting on, again, what is the outcome? What do we intend for children to get out of? And is our chosen arts medium going to justify that or help us achieve that or not?
I'll jump in here and just say also to remove more of the guilt is that like reflecting on my own practice, I do find I'm planning a lot more guided art projects, and mine are kind of geared towards technique and learning about styles and how to use mediums. So I am aware that I am kind of leaning towards that. I really want to teach them all these beautiful techniques that they can use later within art. But just that awareness that I do lean heavier on the guided art helps me to, throughout the day, when children show me that they're really wanting to create something, that I at least just allow it, because they will show you that. Can I have a blank piece of paper, or can I use these recycled materials to glue together? Can I have a glue stick? So instead of being like, no, I didn't intend for this, I'll be like, okay, yes, let's do it, and let's set it up. So they will show you when they are ready to create something and they want the freedom. At least let's allow it if we haven't planned for it. So that's the kind of minimum. When you see them wanting to do that, let's at least give them the opportunities. So if we talk a little bit more about why both matter, and they really do, is because without one, they can't really do the other or enjoy the other fully. So if we don't teach them how to use the materials, and we don't teach them certain techniques, they're going to be limited in what they can do. So imagine a toddler that's, what do toddlers do with paints and paintbrushes? And if we just left it at that and we never really taught them, well, yeah, maybe we should have been giving them paints. But if we never really taught them anything beyond what they instinctively wanted to do with these things, they'll just be limited to that. I mean, there might be a few exceptions of children who will figure it out and just teach themselves how to make art. But for the most part, I think they really benefit from some guidance there. So the guided art, in terms of how to use a material, how to draw things, very valuable for children because, like I said, it will help them later when they're making their own thing. They've already learned what are the different types of lines, and you can really break this down. So I've done a summer program where I try to focus on the main elements of art. So I would teach them what are different types of lines. Let's just explore straight lines, zigzag lines, wiggly lines, curly lines, and we're just doing lines today. And then later we can color them in. So just in that, you will discover that some children find it easy to copy these lines, and some children really are not getting the curvy line, for example. They're just doing the bumpy line, or whatever it is. So these are all very important. You give them those tools, and then later they can use them. That's just one example. Mixing colors is another, using scissors, glue. You kind of open them up to a world of what can you make with all these things, and you can make so much. But also, if we miss the opportunities to give them the process art experiences, then they are only learning to follow instructions, and they're not learning to follow their own instincts in making just whatever they want to make. And we do want both of these things to develop side by side. We want them to be able to follow instructions to learn a new skill, but also kind of just follow your heart and do what you want to do. Both of these things very valuable. And I remember you saying something about, you noticed in younger groups, they're very enthusiastic about art, and then it's pretty common that later they kind of lose that.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably missing from the process art side of things.
Yeah, I always felt like when I taught the 2 to 3 year olds, 3 to 4 year olds even, you could put out a provocation with paints, papers, and they would get really excited, and they wouldn't care about the rules. They wouldn't ask me, what am I supposed to do with it? They would just create. Whereas when I taught let's say starting from 6 to 7, 7 to 8, a lot of times they would pause before they would create with the arts, and they would ask me, what are we doing? What should I do with it? And I always felt that was really sad, because what happens during that transition from, let's say, 5 to 6, where they stop trusting their own intuition to create and start asking. Has it been series of experiences where, guided art has been heavily leaned on, so that's their perception of how art should look like, an adult tells me what to do and I do it? Or has that creativity, that spark, again, been taken away through criticism in any way possible? I mean, I don't know, but yeah, I always notice the difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So hopefully with reflecting on this, we can kind of raise more generations of children who don't lose that spark. And honestly, I feel like if you've ever listened to an artist speak, like an adult artist talk about their art, you'll notice that there's something very similar to children about their expression. And I feel like that is something that is so human in us that most adults kind of lose it along the way, is trusting their instinct and wanting to create, or trusting that the way they view the world, that unique perspective, is worth sharing. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what about crafts? That's a great question. So crafts is a little bit different, I would say, than both of the things we talked about. There's the process art we already discussed, guided art, and then there's crafts. Crafts are, I would say, even more restricted, because they are predetermined product even in size. So usually we'll have templates, cutouts, the colors are kind of preset, everything is kind of preset, pre-cut, or a lot of times it's a lot of prep work for the educator, because you'll have to either trace a bunch of things or print a bunch of things or even cut them out. And then all that the child does is really either follow. If they're cutting, then they can cut, or glue with the adult's guidance. So these activities certainly have a place, I would say, in the classroom, because they could be great for events or occasions, if you're sending home a gift or something. And they can offer a child an opportunity to practice their fine motor skills, such as cutting and gluing. But they are not art experiences, because as you could see from all of what we discussed before, they kind of lack that creativity and freedom on the side of the child. So the child wasn't really involved in choosing this product. They weren't involved very much in making it either, because they're just following lines or following your instruction to how to make it.
I really appreciate how you frame that, because crafts are everywhere in the early years, especially. I think they're all over social media, Pinterest, they're in resource packs. They're also kind of what families expect to see when they come and collect a child. And the intention behind them is always good, of course, but it's worth asking, what is the child actually getting from this experience? So when every child's card or paper looks the same, or every flower has been cut and placed in the exact same spot, whose work is it really? Because if the adult made most of the decisions, then the pride that a child feels when they accomplish it, when they finish it, is actually borrowed. It's not theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, crafts have their place. The fine motor skills, the seasonal moments, the Mother's Day cards, like I still have all of them. The celebrations, that's their place. But crafts are not art experiences, I think we could say, and they don't replace the developmental richness, I guess, of process or even guided art experiences. And I think maybe just the last thing I'd say or add is, if crafts are taking up most of the time at your center, maybe it's just worth reassessing and seeing what you can let go of.
You can totally overlap some of these things. So I've done things before where it's a craft, but I've also added an element of process art within it. So let's say there is a cutout, but behind it there is just kind of different colors that they get to paint or use markers, and then you put the cutout kind of on top. Just, you can combine sometimes too, if you're kind of pressed for, I need to get this thing done, but how can I make it a little bit more unique to the child? And then you'll notice also they're better able to identify the one that they've made, because most of the time with their paintings and their creations, they can tell you right away which one is theirs. But with crafts, they really don't know which one they've made unless you've kind of marked their names on it. So that's a way of also telling how involved the child was, is can they recognize what they made or not?
Oh, I love that. Okay, so I love that we're ending with these, so reflective questions, because I think that's genuinely where professional growth lives, in asking yourself the honest questions. So after your next art experience, maybe reflect on, did the children have a choice in the process? Did the children have a choice in the product? And did the children leave feeling more confident? And just see what your answers are and what comes up, and reflect back on what was discussed during this webinar. So Tamara, this has been such a great session. So before we open things up to the audience for them to share their takeaways, I wanted to give you a chance to maybe share your biggest takeaway from today's webinar, or something that you really wanted educators to walk away with.
Yeah, thank you. This has been really amazing to discuss with you too. I think the biggest takeaway would be to look at the art experiences through a lens of kind of building up the child's self-esteem and confidence, and to help them be seen. So just look at it in terms of their social emotional development, more so than anything. I think that would be the biggest benefit, I think, to them with their art experiences.
I think I shared this with you when we talked earlier, but during my first year of teaching, I had a boy in my class. His name was Khalifa, and he sat next to me. He quickly picked up the black crayon, and on his blank sheet of paper, he made 2 lines, exactly 2, and he held up the paper for me to see. And my instinctive response was, "Wow, that's so beautiful." And he looked at me, and he looked at his paper, and he says, "No, it's lines. See?" And I'll never forget that, or his reaction, because he was trying to tell me, I think, that I didn't really see what he drew.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that it wasn't about showing me something to get my reaction, whether or not it was beautiful or not. What he was trying to tell me is I didn't really see him or see his artwork, and I think I'll always remember that. And just reply back more intentionally. Like, had I just said, "Oh, tell me about those lines," I think he would have got really excited, because he deliberately drew lines and wanted to show me the lines.
Yeah.
And by, "Oh wow, that's beautiful," I think I just
missed the point somewhere.
missed the point, or I didn't acknowledge or validate his effort in drawing those lines.
Yeah.
But
validation, I think that would have been a better word. Totally. To see them fully, and to validate their perspective. So they've made something, and it's not for us, again, to please us or not to please us. It's what they've made, and to just describe it as is, or ask them questions about it, see them as a person. So their art is really about them, and not so much about what they've made right then and there. And we never want to kind of also label children by what they've made then and there, because they're, we all evolve, and our whole character evolves. So does our artwork. So if you say, "Oh wow, you always make these beautifully colored things," and then they think that, like, okay, that's all that they can do. No, like, it's this time they've made this. So just viewing the child as a child, as a person who is evolving, and what they've made is what they've made right now, and might be just how they're feeling today, or in that moment, and what they were thinking then and there. So it's really just about being in the moment, being present, seeing them, and being very, like, non-judgmental and just supportive. Even like positivity, like, yes, our tone should be positive, but we don't need to always have something positive to say. It's just about being seen. "Oh yes, I've seen what you made. You made lines. And if you want to describe a little bit longer or prolong that conversation, you can describe it even further, but it doesn't need to be super positive or negative or anything. It is just a neutral, safe space to be seen, as you said." Yeah.
Or embellished, right? So I think that's what he felt like. I didn't really see it. I barely glanced at it. I said, "That's so beautiful," but it wasn't what he did. And I think that also as adults, we feel the same way too. Like if I submitted, a writing and I knew it wasn't really polished, and I was looking for somebody to give me feedback, and they said, "Oh wow, it's perfect." I feel like they didn't really see it, they didn't really read it, they don't care very much, and I probably wouldn't go back to them for advice or for conversation or for anything.
Yeah.
So I think that's how he felt, and I thank him for opening up my eyes to that exchange.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So thank you so much, Tamara. Thank you for giving us your time today. It genuinely means a lot. For everyone still here in the chat, please let us know your biggest takeaway so that we can see what resonated the most with you. And if you felt that this session was helpful or useful, please share it with a colleague who needs to hear it or who could benefit from it. Professional learning always travels further when we pass it on. From everyone at Parent App and the Early Years Academy, thank you for joining us. Take care, and we'll see you at the next one.